Welcome to Iron Butterfly Podcast. My name is Megan Jaffer.
And I'm Cadie Hopkins, and we'll be your hosts.
We created Iron Butterfly Podcast in honor of Eloise Page, the original Iron Butterfly. 80 years ago, Eloise joined the Office of Strategic Services, trailblazing a path for what ultimately became the United States intelligence community. She rose the ranks from secretary to case officer, defying the norms of her time, and eventually became the first female chief of station at CIA. Eloise was known among her colleagues to be a fierce fighter with a core of steel, and she earned the codename Iron Butterfly. Our podcast continues her legacy, inviting the unsung heroines of the United States intelligence community to share their stories with aspiring leaders like you.
Hello, welcome to this latest episode of Iron Butterfly. I am Jessica Hersey. I have over 27 years of experience with the intelligence community. I started right out of college. I had one of those interview processes that went a little something like, can't tell you where you're going. I can't tell you what you're going to be doing. I can't tell you who you've been doing it for, but it's cool, trust me. And I did exactly that. I packed up my bags, moved to Northern Virginia from Boston, Massachusetts, and I've been working for the intelligence community as a contractor ever since. I've worked for the CIA, NGA, various defense agencies, and in various roles. But I think my favorite role has always been as mentor and champion and sponsor of women as we've all tried to navigate this crazy little career world around us. So I really am excited about Iron Butterfly and really excited about participating because I love what this is all about, celebrating women as pioneers and innovators and creators and leaders. In fact, I brought my 12-year-old daughter, hi Summer, because I want her to be inspired by not only our amazing guest of honor, but by Cadie and Megan and this entire Iron Butterfly podcasting team to support what you guys are all doing. My current role is as Vice President of Business Development for Janes. Janes is a open source intelligence company that has partnered with the intelligence community for years. Our interconnected foundational military intelligence capability has over 130 million data connections that link foundational military equipment to event intelligence, to order of battle, to just an immense amount of data, coupled with what we do from a geoeconomic analysis perspective or a market forecasting capability. Janes provides a open source portfolio that really augments and supports the intelligence community and defense from a warfighting and intelligence analysis mission perspective. And I'm really proud of Janes for sponsoring and supporting Iron Butterfly because we have over 250 analysts and contributors and subject matter experts all across the globe that they have terrific tradecraft and expertise that feels a little sometimes disconnected from the pointy end of the mission. And to be able to provide this connective tissue back to the intelligence community, back to folks like you, I think really is powerful. And we thank you for allowing Janes to be part of the story. So thank you for all of that. I do have an important job here today, and I brought my notes so I don't screw it up. But I do get to introduce Miss Jennifer Ewbank. Jennifer Ewbank is a senior national security executive with deep global expertise who served as deputy director of the Central Intelligence Agency for Digital Innovation from 2019 to early 2024. In that role, she led the transformation of one of the world's most sophisticated and secure digital technology ecosystems. Jennifer's prior roles at CIA included 4 tours as chief of station, as well as chief of the former National Resources Division, where she built partnerships with U.S. law enforcement and American citizens and institutions, both public and private, to advance the U.S. national security mission. Jennifer would describe herself as someone who takes her work seriously, but never takes herself too seriously. I'm trying to remember that too, so thank you for that. She's adventurous, empathetic, friendly, and curious, though some would be surprised to find out she's truly an introvert. She also claims to be a bit goofy and painfully uncool, but we agree to disagree, and we'll talk about that later. But Jennifer loves hiking, travel, long walks with her golden retriever, Pilates, yoga, photography, reading, and writing. In years past, she's also painted, enjoyed winter sports, and studied numerous foreign languages. A fun fact about Jennifer is that she completed the Camino de Santiago to mark her retirement from government and transition to the U.S. private sector. I will say this, that I don't think any of this is painfully uncool. I think this is really awesome. Thank you for everything you've done for national security. Thank you for Iron Butterfly. You guys are awesome. And over to you.
Well, welcome, Jennifer. It's so great to see you.
It is wonderful to be here. I'm delighted. Been looking forward to this for a while.
So have we.
Yeah, Jennifer, for those who don't know, probably everybody does know because she's an icy celebrity.
Yes. If there is one, you are one.
She's like an influencer for the icy.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I've learned something already. So I think I'm just going to interview you. And then
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure everyone wants to hear your story because you're the one that we're all here for. We're just so thankful that you said yes, and we were excited for the audience. We didn't know Jennifer before, and we got to meet her before this recording, and
She came at the recommendation of one of our previous podcast guests, Laura Thomas.
yes.
several of my friends and colleagues have been on, and they've all said, you got to do it someday. So, okay, great.
Well, and we're so glad that you said yes, because we still get a little nervous because this is not for everyone, right? Not everyone feels comfortable, and especially in the type of work you've done in the past. This is not a comfortable setting where you're in front of a mic and cameras and like, okay, tell me about yourself. So we appreciate it. We know that it's different. We want to make it as comfortable as possible. So we like to start, and I know you've listened to a few episodes, just really basic. We want to know, how did you come into all of this?
Where did you come from?
Where did you come from? Yeah, really. Where did you come from? And how you kind of grew up and what brought you to the intelligence community.
That. Yeah. Thank you. And before I kind of start on that, I will just say I really love what you are doing. I love the way that you're shining a spotlight on the human stories behind people who work in the intelligence community and in kind of supporting related fields. It's something that goes largely unseen. And what I love most about it is that you see all these extraordinary people who each in their own way are both ordinary and special. And they're probably your neighbors and you don't realize that they're doing something super cool. And so I love that about it. And what you've developed this amazing kind of kaleidoscope of personalities and backgrounds. And I was looking through
Megan's going to lose her mind right now.
Literally,
I'm serious.
No, let me tell you why. It means so much. I mean, I don't think you realize the specific words that you used, but the fact that you said the ordinary and the special is exactly how we feel. We feel like every single person who sat in the seat or spoken on the mic is special in their own way. And yet they are ordinary citizens. They're your sisters, your brothers, or your mothers, your friends, your neighbors, just like you said. And so that's really important to us for the audience to hear. And then
and it also makes you realize that you don't have to be extraordinary to do extraordinary things. Like you can just be an ordinary person who like does things really well and like have a really big impact.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. And then you use the word kaleidoscope.
Yeah.
So kaleidoscope is actually a group of butterflies. And so
did you know that?
I did not. It's a classifier for a group of butterflies.
Yes.
Yeah. I pride myself on knowing, it's a murder of ravens and it's a okay.
So when we were thinking about company names before, I think actually when we were thinking about our documentary, we were thinking, okay, how do you?
Love that.
We were looking up like what is a group of butterflies, and they said kaleidoscope, and we were like, oh my god, that's
Megan has
great.
been wanting to put it on a T-shirt for.
I have. I have to find something kitschy to say about kaleidoscope. Otherwise, I will.
Well, Jennifer just said it for you.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. So anyway, sorry to interrupt.
No,
but
I think that's lovely. That's lovely. I love hearing, your motivation behind this podcast is clearly a labor of love. So I appreciate that, and thank you again for the invitation. So, what's my story? So I grew up in Northern California, and literally a child of the space race. So the time, and my father was in the space industry, and so he was one of the first in an old program called Corona. It was a satellite program, one of the first, and it was secret for a long, long time. It only declassified much later, and I learned that he had been on that program as a young engineer in the late 50s. Wow. And then he went on to work on the Space Shuttle and the Hubble Space Telescope and lots of other cool projects along the way. So I grew up 100% nerd. I played with an abacus as a child.
Love it.
We had a slide rule on the kitchen counter. Most people would never know what that is anymore, but it's a magical device that can help you solve complex mathematical equations. And you know, it's kind of a, I don't know, kitschy story, but like everyone else at that time, I was going to be an astronaut. That was absolutely what I was going to be, and I thought about it all the time. Coincidentally, the year I was born, there was a very famous, happened to be a Soviet cosmonaut named Valentina Tereshkova, who was the first woman ever in space. That was the year I was born. I won't give the year, but yes, it was a long time ago. The year I was born, and she was both the first woman, but also the first astronaut ever to fly solo.
Oh,
period.
wow.
Any gender. And so really kind of special. And when I learned that later, I thought, oh, there was some alignment of things there. And it was another 20 years before Sally Ride became the first American, right? Mm-hmm. So my life took a different path. But I also wanted to be a pilot. There's something I think about moving away.
All of the thrill-seeking jobs.
Well, there's a little bit of thrill-seeking, but also just things that move you away and give you perspective, a different perspective on you know, your surroundings, your environment, your life. And I didn't think of it that way. I just thought it'd be super cool. And so, like a lot of people, I read books about, you know, famous aviatrixes, I guess one would say. And so, of course, everyone heard about Amelia Earhart. I thought, oh, yeah, she's super cool, first to cross the Atlantic. But I came across a book when I was a young girl, written by and about Beryl Markham, who was also a famous aviatrix. And she also crossed the Atlantic, but she did it alone, and she did it going west, which is much, much harder. And lots of people had tried over the years. Many had died, and she was the first. And I just thought, and she wrote this amazing book. As I recall, it was amazing. Of course, I was very young. It could be really dreadful for all I know. I never went back and reread it, but it had an impact. And she just struck me as somebody who was adventurous, bold, resilient, independent, and I thought, I'd love to be something like that, right? And so even before I ever thought about, you know, the intelligence community, that seed was planted in my mind, and so fast forward, you know, many years, and I'd gone off and done other work, and I received a call from a recruiter, and some guy who said, I'm calling from the CIA, and I said, yeah, right. And he said, no, really, and I mean, it was literally something as articulate as, yeah, right. And fast forward, as I recall, probably a few weeks later, I was, you know, knocking on the door of a room at the airport Marriott to meet some random dude who claimed to be from the CIA. And you know, here I am all these years later. Now, I don't recommend this, parents. Don't recommend your daughters do this. But
Don't go to random hotel rooms with guys.
But it was a different time. It was a different time, and
Yeah.
you know, I guess an unusual person. And so, yeah, that kind of started it off, and it was all a leap of faith because no one's ever done the job before, right? And so you have no idea what it might be. And I mean, I've seen a few Bond films and that kind of thing, but I just thought it'd be super interesting. And the last thing I'll mention, which kind of fell between those two kind of series of events was a really great opportunity when I was a child. So I was one of 4 kids in our family, traditional, 50s and 60s. We had one working parent and one stayed at home, and kind of classic suburban American upbringing. And I had the opportunity when I was 15, I think. My parents sent me on a trip to France for the summer. And one of my favorite teachers organized this every few years, and she and her partner would take about 20 students and spent the summer traveling all around France on something that was sort of a combination of fun but education. And so going town to town to town and seeing, an actual Roman Colosseum and seeing, the Louvre and tasting wine at 15. Don't tell my parents, and all this stuff. And I'd been studying the language for a few years, and it just sparked something in me. I just knew that whatever I was going to do in the future was going to have that aspect. Give me the opportunity to visit new places, try new things, meet new people, learn new languages, and all the rest of it. And so, even without planning, I sort of fell into what ended up being absolutely the right thing for me.
So I want to back up just a little bit because I know our listeners, when we hear from them, they often comment on what our guests studied in college versus what they end up doing. Like we always give Sue as an example, Sue Gordon, who studied zoology, and then she ended up at the CIA. So
great major, Sue. We love it.
It's a fantastic major. Any major you can think of, people in the agency have studied. Anything you imagine.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. And okay, so this is a little bit embarrassing for me. So
Sorry.
So I started as an engineering major.
Oh, wow.
And I ended as poli-sci and French.
Why is that?
That's not embarrassing.
And my nemesis was 7 a.m. math class.
Totally reasonable.
And I now know that biology is such that, people of that age should not be doing math class at 7 a.m. It's the only class I can get in. And that set me on a different trajectory. And little did I know, it actually set me on a trajectory that I found, super fulfilling and, wonderful.
Well, I agree. I went into college for finance. I took my first
didn't
college
know that.
math class and was out. I was like, nope.
I
And
loved
ended
math,
up
just not at 7 a.m. after partying all night.
So
Oh my God,
switched
that's
to
actually
international
really funny.
relations. Yeah.
That's really
So I
funny.
get it.
So, Jennifer, it sounded like when you were talking about getting the call from the CIA recruiter that you didn't go straight from college into that. Like you
No,
were
I
working
did not.
first. So,
Yeah.
like, what were you
Yeah,
doing before?
So I was at the State Department. I was in Foreign Service for a while.
Okay.
Oh,
And
wow.
before that, I just worked at a company for a couple of years. Nothing interesting. Just trying to figure out what I wanted to do with life and going through the test and interview process for the State Department.
Gotcha.
So I worked with them, studied a couple languages, served in Thailand and Burma, came back to the States thinking I was going to go find something else, and then recruiter.
Okay, awesome. So I actually would love to go back to the hotel for just a second. So can you help us paint this picture of what this looked like, what this felt like? Like that actually does seem like a scene from a movie. So walk us through what you're thinking when you walk up to the building. Are you at any point are you am I about to get murdered? What?
No, I wasn't thinking that. I wasn't thinking that, but I was thinking some version of what the hell am I doing? I wasn't fearful, but I was intrigued. I think for sure I was intrigued, and that drew me in, and I thought I wanted to try something different, and I may well have met a few agency people in my early part of my career, and thought, oh well, they seemed more like me, and. So it won't be entirely flattering to the gentleman who was the recruiter, but I mean, it all worked out just fine. But I would say just a real stereotype of what I later kind of learned to be the typical operations officer in the CIA way back then, and I mean literally dressed with the uniform and. Same manner of speaking, and a whole lot of.
What is the uniform? Is that just
back then it was khaki pants, a blue jacket, and a light blue shirt, and brown shoes and brown belt. And I mean, it was literally
Straight
the
out of
uniform.
Central
If
Casting.
it was business casual, that's what they wore.
Oh wow. Okay.
And so I 100%. That is absolutely what it was. And then there were several moments where, asking me questions, trying to shock me. I think just to see, how would I react? Was I going to roll with things? Was I a little overly sensitive or not? And I'm not particularly sensitive. So, it was intriguing. And so I had that interview, went off for a series of tests, and one thing led to another. But over the course of relatively, I guess I would say relatively quick clearance process, since I had already been in the department. So so it all worked out.
Yeah, clearly. So take us through just kind of how your career unfolded. Obviously, you've done like a little bit in operations, a little bit in tech. Like, where did you start? How did you kind of progress through the agency? I know you had a bunch of really cool jobs.
So I came up entirely through the operational world. And so it was, learn a new language, go to a new country, study all new issues, meet all new people every few years, and loved it. And so did that for decades, and was chief of station. So that's our senior official overseas in a country, responsible for everything the agency does in the country, and then responsible for, let's say, kind of coordinating, integrating leadership through influence for the broader intelligence community that is at post. And so loved that, but that was very much an operational role.
That's a big job, right? For those who don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like the
is.
biggest operational job you can have.
It's the best job anywhere. And so it's either, I've had the pleasure of doing that 4 times and loved every single one of them. Everything from tiny station, mid-sized station, large station to mega station, and what our largest place. And what I loved about it, each experience was different, but you have so much autonomy. It's really an entrepreneurial job. You identify what the threats and risks are out there, and you figure out what you're going to do to collect or to thwart those threats. And it's a little bit like the old Apollo 13 moment, where you look around, you figure out what resources do I have at my disposal? What are my tools? What are my people? What do I have here? What is the goal we're trying to achieve? And then you gotta like MacGyver your way there. And so
I love that.
and
Total
it really is.
description.
And you might just be a couple people, on the far side of the globe somewhere, with something really important to accomplish, or you might be a huge office with every skill and resource you can possibly imagine, and everything in between. So loved that. And another part of it that I really loved about that job was something that I think the average person who's not part of the intelligence community wouldn't think of intuitively. A big part of the job was building relationships with the host government. And so we are close partners with, any number of countries, including ones where you might be a little surprised, right? Where we can have pragmatic, practical, honest partnerships against mutual objectives. I mean, everyone, not everybody, but almost everyone wants to stop terrorists. And so, that's usually a safe space, unless, they're one of those governments. And so without noticing it, it wasn't something conscious on my part, but without noticing it, that operational career really kind of tracked developments with technology, and technology more and more became a really critical part of what we do. So the operational mission, for those who are less familiar, is really the classic world of recruiting spies and collecting secrets. So, James Bond is much more exciting. We don't have a lot of glamorous cocktail parties and high-speed car chases, but in essence, it is get information to thwart a threat or to understand what an adversary is trying to do to harm your country. That's the bottom line. And that job, particularly once this sort of digital revolution began, just became harder and harder and harder and harder and harder. Think about big data analytics, you think about the world of ubiquitous sensing, and trying to remain hidden is really hard, right? There's nowhere, you can't go anywhere, talk to anyone, write anything, say anything,
buy anything
without a sensor somewhere on Earth recording it. Billions and billions and billions of sensors. So you can kind of understand how hard that job became. And so just organically really required all these other resources. And so it required more and more and more of these capabilities in the digital world, more and more of these capabilities in the more classic science and technology world. So I came up through that and was a little bit surprised, but really honored and thrilled when the former director, Gina Haspel, asked me if I would take on this leadership role, which was my final role at the agency, which was Deputy Director of CIA for Digital Innovation. It's a long name. I couldn't really come up with a better one. But it's basically, it encompasses everything that's ones and zeros. And so my first thought was, oh, that's amazing. I'm super honored. Yes, of course I'll do it. My second thought was, how am I going to do that? And honestly, it took me just a few moments to reflect upon it and realize that I had been doing all of that at the other end in the field, really trying to put into practice, trying to use the new capabilities, trying to innovate new capabilities with the resources we had in the field. And I think upon reflection, that's partly what the director wanted, was to bring that additional puzzle piece to what was a really an amazing team already. I mean, extraordinary people, but to bring that field perspective, the mission focus, and a sense of kind of urgency. So long road up through operations, doing the classic job, spot, assess, develop, recruit spies, collect intelligence, and then leading teams to do that, learning a lot of languages along the way, meeting tons of amazing people, and then coming into this final role, which was about 4.5 years, and really fascinating. Loved every minute of it. As I used to tell people, there aren't many people at this stage in life who go to work every day and learn something new. And that was awesome for me.
Totally. I have so many questions.
No,
but I know you can
go ahead. I was just going to say that, I love just the way how you described your job. And we've only had 2 case officers.
Maybe Laura and I.
And Marjorie, who that wasn't her, that was her pseudo. But I really loved how you described it, because I think that's something that, people who are interested in this work or this field, they often feel lost, especially if they're not from the DMV, right? Like if you're from Middle America and you're being recruited or you're applying.
Trust me, nobody who goes to UC Berkeley thinks about joining the CIA.
Yeah, no, I'm sure.
Trust me. I was surprised I got in. I mean, I was surprised I slipped through the net.
That's hilarious.
That's amazing.
But they just want to know the basics of what the job is going to be.
Yeah.
It's not like they need to know everything behind it, but just going into it, knowing the basics. This is what the job is. This is what you're going to be doing.
I think fundamentally you have to have a few qualities, and I haven't thought through this systematically, so I'll miss a few. But you have to have innate intellectual curiosity. You have to really want to know how something works. You have to be able to develop an interest in, like, well, what if that party wins the election in this allied nation? What does that mean for us? Or, how are they going to build this bomb? Whatever it might be.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to really genuinely be interested in figuring it out. I loved puzzles as a child, and there's something to be said about this job actually being the kind of a professional reflection of that, because you're really trying to put pieces together.
Yeah.
And you never have the full picture, and you have to be, I think, able to live comfortably with ambiguity, to understand, like, there are very different personalities within the same organization, the CIA, and case officers, operations officers generally survive and thrive in the gray zone. Like, you don't know everything, but you have to make choices and you have to move, because there's risk in not taking action.
Yeah.
And feeling like, okay, I've got my intuition, I've got my training, I've got the knowledge I have. I can think about what is the, not to quote Donald Rumsfeld, but what are the unknown unknowns, and feel confident moving and doing stuff.
Yeah.
That's not for everybody. And so it involves also a willingness to accept, risk, to understand that there's risk in everything you do. There could be physical risk, it could be professional risk, it could be reputational risk, whatever it might be. But that's part of the job.
Yeah.
And to just be able to stand by the choices you make and do the best you can. But it's not something anyone has ever done before they join.
Yeah.
It's interesting too because I think the perception of a lot of government organizations is, and particularly in national security, is that they're very risk averse.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to hear you talk about risk that way.
Both things are true, right? Because you have to, I mean, the organizations have to exist within a government that is about avoiding and managing risk in essence. And so think about the way, this is really nerdy and kind of wonky, but think about the way the budget is made out of Congress, and you think about how we execute the budget and how we manage personnel, and all these things have factors that are meant to avoid risk. But fundamentally, the CIA's core job is risk.
Yeah.
It's risk. And so you have to be able to do both things at the same time. I have to be able to operate on the street as a case officer with flexibility and agility and be able to make decisions and stand by them. And the organization as a whole has to use its money wisely and, manages people well and all those other things. So it's a little bit schizophrenic, but that's just the nature of the business.
And I was just going to say, in addition to this, because you said that we live in the gray zone, and I wanted to also say to the audience that it's funny because in the intelligence community, there are jobs where it's either black or white.
Oh,
right?
100%.
Totally.
And so
Yes.
that's also something that's interesting about the intelligence community. You can have a job where you're living in the gray zone, or you can have a job where it's
That's
black
absolutely
and
right.
white.
That's
Totally.
absolutely right.
That's so true.
Yeah. And so, coming from that world to lead a large technology organization, there's a bit of a culture clash there for sure. And because this, like I said, there's just really extraordinary people doing some super cool work that I think your friends and neighbors would be very proud of. But the way big technology programs work in a government agency or department, even one like the CIA that's known for being more agile and able to take risk, they can be siloed. There's a lot of oversight in terms of finances, as there should be. It's difficult to bend the system to our need to move fast and to innovate, and so I think it takes a little bit of outsider disruption from time to time as maybe as a catalyst in the system, because otherwise it really can fall prey to managing big tech programs in a vertical silo and doing it on 5-year program timelines. And that's not the way the world works, and that's not the way our adversaries work. And so, again, it's one of these strange situations where you have to be able to do both. You have to be able to lead a large program that's on a 5-year cycle that is money that we won't talk about, but eye-watering amounts of money. And you need to be able to solve a problem tomorrow because there's somebody at the other end who's waiting for you. Yeah. And so that is an interesting leadership challenge I found. And whether it was me or somebody else with my background, I felt that it was a helpful catalyst in a system that was doing amazing things, but occasionally, I think, refocusing on the immediacy of a mission and the challenge and the urgency and what the threat landscape is and what our hostile adversaries are trying to do. I felt like that helped.
Definitely. So I want to ask kind of maybe a fun question, which is, you mentioned James Bond a couple times. So we love talking about James Bond.
Not the reasons you think.
And I'm curious, like, from your perspective, because again, like, you have done, I think, some jobs where it's the average person's most literal idea of like what a spy is, right? It's represented by Hollywood. And I'm curious from your perspective, what of what you saw on James Bond, or what our listeners might see on James Bond, is real versus like what is exaggerated? Like, where did you experience some of those things, or maybe where were you like, that's hilarious?
I think it's all exaggerated for entertainment value, right? And crazy things that would just never happen, because nobody wants to see me spend 5 hours at a computer writing reports after a meeting, right? So, but if it's not reported and it doesn't find its way into an analytic product for the president, then why are we doing it, right?
Yeah.
So that's an important part of it. The fundamental goals are the same. Figure out what bad guys are doing, and help your country, or help your allies. That's all true. There are, despite my joke, there is occasionally a glamorous party, and there is occasionally a high-speed car. My land speed record once was Ljubljana to Venice in 2 hours and 7 minutes for anyone who's ever driven that. And so,
Amazing.
But, and there were moments where I felt the, I don't know, the fun and the excitement. Not the fun, not always the fun, but the excitement for sure. And I have moments that I think of, and so I remember a moment I was going to a meeting with, a spy, and I was on my way in the roundabout way that we go. And I was flying down a major river in a capital right through the center of the city in a, flat out with a V8 engine on the back, full speed ahead with one driver, a boat driver in the back. And I happened to be wearing this very long leopard print chiffon scarf that was like floating in the wind, and I was carrying boatloads of money and a lot of like spy gear. And I kind of looked around and I thought, this is not bad. This is not bad.
That's incredible.
Did you feel like a badass?
Maybe a little.
Okay.
And there are other moments when, where I've met terrorists.
Yeah.
That is exciting, not fun. But how to compare? I really can't compare. It's just the movies are an intensified, time collapsed version, and I don't have a history of blowing up buildings or shooting a lot of people. But the core of, recruiting spies, collecting intelligence, working with foreign partners to thwart threats. I mean, all of that is fact. It's just the how sometimes.
Yeah, totally.
They want to make it
such a good
sexy.
answer.
That was the best answer.
Oh my
I
gosh.
think everyone's going to love this.
Yeah, I think so too. What is your cocktail of choice at the fancy parties?
Oh, so I always have the same cocktail. So, but it depends. Depends on where you are, right?
Okay.
Because it's situationally, dependent. So where it's available, I always drink the same thing. I'm a classic girl, so it's Manhattan. It's always a Manhattan.
I love that.
Up.
Amazing.
Yep, always. There will be one waiting for me when I get home.
Oh,
That's the best.
awesome.
That's
Yes.
the best.
We were wondering if you could tell us your most fulfilling job that you ever had and why, or a story about that job.
It has to be my last job in the agency.
Wow.
It just has to be.
That's awesome that it like culminated.
No,
Yeah.
and I could not have planned it better. I feel very fortunate to be able to go out on a high note after 3+ decades. I loved it, and I struggle with answering sometimes because modesty is a virtue in my household growing up, and so it could have been lots of other people in that role. It happened to be me. But I felt like it was such a pivotal moment. And it was, frankly, it was not easy. I'm just going to tell you straight up. So I arrived into the job in 2019. The directorate, for those who don't follow such things, had been recently created. It was a major reorganization of the CIA. And they created this directorate at the end of 2015, and then I arrived 4 years later. There had been one person as the deputy director for director of digital innovation, and then I replaced him. And there was still a lot of, let's say, uncertainty around what was called the modernization program back then. I won't go down into the wonky details of all that, but little did I know when I arrived into this job that one of the things that was swirling throughout the workforce was that the directorate was going to be disbanded.
Oh,
and
wow.
that, that would be my job
Wow.
to basically, put a
Close
nail in the
it
coffin. So I arrived to this, massive organization with, thousands of people all around the world, doing highly technical work. I'd never done one of the jobs in that organization. I knew very few of the senior leadership team by virtue of that. A few of them probably thought they should be in my chair. There were these rumors swirling, little did I know, that the directorate was going to be disbanded. we were under constant attack, our systems, under constant attack by hostile adversaries. Our budget was insufficient for the challenges that we faced, at least in our kind of a traditional approach. And then, not long after arriving, COVID.
Oh my gosh! So you're really set up for success.
So it was really but it was kind of just jump head first, and so it was fascinating, and it did take me. It did take me a little bit of time. Obviously, it's a huge organization, lots to learn, and I never learned everything because it's just a span of control issue. But those first few months, really meeting teams, hearing about their programs, trying to figure out how all the pieces fit together, and each meeting thinking, okay, what can I bring to this? And so I won't say at the end because those kinds of conversations continued throughout the 4.5 years, but there came a moment when I realized that in fact I could bring something that I felt would be helpful. And again, disclaimer, amazing team doing amazing work, exceptional patriots and really gifted technologists. But I felt there was something.
Yeah.
I felt that I could tap into the things that we naturally did in the operational world would actually help. And so things like, these are all kind of buzzwords, but when you live them in reality and implement them, it doesn't sound like a buzzword. So integration. So we've had these kind of technical silos, and like any big company I've met, in any government agency and department, there's a time where you can no longer create anything new if you're not working across those silos and actually partnering well with people.
Yeah.
And everything works against that. The way the budget works, the way the personnel system works, like all the things work against it. But I come in up through the organization where that's what you did. Who's on your team? What are your resources? How do you solve a complex problem? And everybody has a role. And so that integration role was important. I thought my, having lived what was the threat landscape and understanding what our most aggressive and capable adversaries were planning to do to us. Interestingly, in a large technology organization in Washington, that can often get lost because, there's so much complexity in running a big tech program, right? Like, people don't have all day long to study all that other stuff, but I think it was really important to have a better sense of the why, like what are we trying to accomplish and why are we trying to do it? Because that really gets to things like urgency, gets to ambition, an ability or willingness to accept a bit of risk to accomplish something that's really going to be transformational. And so those perspectives of mine, I think, added something to the organization, and I hope, and I used the word I think twice already, but I hope served as a catalyst for some things. And so I will say, as I mentioned a few moments ago too, like I learned something new every day, but I have to say, most days I went home and I thought, okay, I accomplished something. And you don't always feel that, particularly in government.
100%.
And I embraced, after decades in that world, I embraced the name of the directorate, Digital Innovation, and I embraced the I. I thought nobody else had that mandate, so I was just going to, interpret it expansively. And so I used to describe myself pretty frequently as being in polite conflict with the system, because I had ideas about where things needed to change in order for us to actually outpace adversaries in the digital world. And by the way, the digital world is supporting everything that's happening in the physical world. So I felt very strongly that there were things we needed to do as an organization. And it was an amazing opportunity to have the platform where I felt empowered to try. So that was great. That's a really long way of saying that was my favorite role ever. And then second would be every chief of station job I ever had.
Wow.
Such a good answer.
It really was.
I also, Jennifer, I think it's just occurring to me, because I think we've had a few other women deputy directors on. You also served at a really interesting moment.
Yes.
Where there was a woman director and all women deputy directors. Can you talk about what that was like?
It was amazing. So it wasn't, I almost didn't notice at first, which sounds really silly, but So I obviously accepted the job with great pleasure and honor, and then looked around like, well, that's interesting. And what was so cool about it was that the selections had been made along the way, absent some intent to create a team of 5 women, and 5 women deputy directors, and then the director is a woman, and then of course we would say a principal. We wouldn't say it this way, but there's a principal deputy. I think that helps describe to your listeners how it works. So you've got 1 and 2, and then you have 5 who head the 5 organizations that comprise the CIA. And so, what's funny though, I did a couple of times get a comment like, "Oh, wow, they're all women." I said, "I know, isn't that interesting? In all these years, I never asked you why they were all men."
There's all men at the table.
And I won't claim. I don't know. I always hate when I hate to ascribe things to the fact that somebody is a particular gender. But I will say that something magical happened that had not happened previously. And maybe it was lots of other influences and maybe supported by the fact that we were all women. So pandemic hit, and the challenges we faced trying to lead a large organization through that was really, truly formidable and unprecedented, literally, since we'd never had that kind of a pandemic since long before the CIA was created. And two really interesting things happened. So the 5 deputies, I think I started one of them, started a group chat. We'd come in the morning, we'd open up our group chat, and throughout the day, we were exchanging notes. What are you doing on this? What are you doing on that? What do you think about this? How is that working for you? And it was, a persistent chat, so we could pull it up if you were gone for a few days. And it was a really supportive environment. And it had not happened previously. It doesn't mean that it wouldn't have, but I think the pull of this really, daunting challenge of trying to lead an organization through that kind of uncertainty and risk, plus the fact that we felt we could trust each other and we could help each other without it being competitive in any way.
Well, not everyone had, not one person owned the answer.
No,
it was
absolutely
like,
true.
What are you doing? Is this working for your
sharing
department?
power.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
sharing power.
And then the other thing we did is that we started having, we set aside an hour early morning once a week for coffee, and we rotated in each other's offices. And that was, sacrosanct. That was something we never rolled it to a deputy. If you were there, if you were in town, you were there. And it was, one of my colleagues used to call it the most productive hour of the week, because it was, unvarnished candor. We knew that we could say anything we wanted to say, that we left that room as a team, and that we knew we could count on discretion and professionalism and little friendship. And so we would just come in. We'd all come in with a little list of things. I need to talk to you about this. I'm having a problem with that. We need to work on the budget for this. We need more people for this. And we would work through our list over coffee and friendly banter and leave having accomplished something exceptional. And again, that's something else that had not existed prior to that. I can't say specifically it was because it was women, but it happened when the 5 of us were a team.
That's really special.
Yeah. And I don't know if people really understand that, during this time, you talk about, I know that people heard the buzzword essential worker, right? There are people who had to go in and work, which were the nurses and the doctors and the mailmen and the firefighters, right?
CIA was working.
And I wanted to point that out, that, the work that the CIA does and a big portion of the intelligence community, they had to be in there. They couldn't do their work from home. And so they kept, you guys kept it going.
That's absolutely true. And shameless plug for digital tech and data science. But really, one of the keys that enabled us to do that was data science. Really being able to monitor and analyze the data, think about the pandemic statistics. We followed them very closely, gave us lots of good information to make choices about where and when and in what proximity people would work. And the CIA, as a result, in my opinion, probably managed the pandemic better than anybody in government. And we maintained our focus on mission, our ability to deliver. So it was a challenging time, but really rewarding as well.
That's
love
awesome. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit because I know you've transitioned out of government.
Yeah.
And I know you also had a really special experience once you left. So I would love if you would tell us a little bit about what you did when you left. And that experience.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'd love to. So, again, something else that may not reflect entirely well on me, but that's okay. So I fulfilled a goal that I'd had for several decades. So when I was a student in southern France at university, I had first heard and learned about the Camino de Santiago, which is traditionally a Catholic pilgrimage route. Pilgrims have been walking it since the 9th century. And one of the main routes begins in southern France, and then it's up over the Pyrenees and across northern Spain out to the coast. You hit the big cathedral in Santiago de Compostela, and then you can continue on to the coast for those who want to. But I'd wanted to do it forever. And just because I thought, well, that'd be so interesting, right? And I never had the opportunity. It was just I never had that much time. It's 800 kilometers, and so it's at least 5 weeks. And I'm not young, so I took 6 weeks and a couple extra days in there, and I realized that I had not had 6 weeks to do something for myself like that since the summer after my sophomore year of high school.
Oh my gosh!
Because since I'd always been working. I, of course, had vacations along the way, but 6 weeks.
6 weeks is,
right. Yeah. That's a long time. So when I knew that I would be retiring, I planned it long in advance, and I just jealously guarded that time. And so I retired at the last day of March, and then I left the first week of April.
Did you go alone?
I did. And this is the part where people are like, what? Because I'm a painful introvert. And for those 4.5 years in particular, I'll say this. The job always required me to work against type. Always. Always. But the nature of those 4.5 years, it was such that I never had the moment to breathe. And I loved it every minute. I would do it again in a heartbeat. But what I didn't recognize is just, the weight of it all. And I was just physically exhausted. And so I went alone, and I loved long days of just not talking to anyone. I got up early in the morning. I'd have a cup of coffee. I put my hiking boots on. I walked all day until I got to a village I needed to be in. I found dinner and I went to bed. And so honestly, the first couple weeks were basically that, walking over mountains and fields. And then feeling, kind of little by little, this like injection of energy and the thing that I hadn't noticed, just like optimism, right? And I've always been a super optimistic person, but apparently not for the last 4.5 years because of after the pilgrimage, people have observed like, oh, you seem so much lighter. And I'm like, oh, really? I was like, oh, okay. Maybe it's just the weight of all of that heavy stuff. But it was a great experience. And I think having a physical challenge as part of a transition from one life to the next is tremendously valuable, in my opinion. And the other thing I'll say is, I'd seen so many people retire from the CIA, and for those who haven't worked there, it might be hard to understand. Like it can be for those in certain jobs, if it's really the job you love and it's really exciting, if maybe you're an operations officer or a tech operations officer. It doesn't matter what it is. If it's exciting, if it's completely consuming, it's very hard to leave. It's really hard to leave, even when you leave on your own terms and it's time. And so I've been decades in government service, and it's absolutely my time. But I'd seen so many people leave and then start a new job a week later, and it was like their world was encased in amber in that moment when they departed, and the good, bad, and the ugly, and that transition was really hard for them. And I know a number of people who, to my observation, they seemed like they were grieving, and so I just thought, okay, well, I need to be a little more intentional about all of this, and so that's why probably a year out when I knew that I would be retiring, I just, again, jealously guarded that time, and I knew that that's what I was going to do. Get away, just spend time decompressing, breathing fresh air, eating great food, getting lots of exercise, meeting lovely people along the way, seeing amazing sights. And for me, it was the perfect way to transition, because it, no regrets, all appreciation, all gratitude, all joy, and bonus, kind of restored by energy.
That's really self-reflective and thoughtful. That, I mean, we know a lot of people who have transitioned out, not only in the CIA, but in other career,
I would say in
intelligence.
Any extreme career.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And we've noticed very similar patterns of that, where and I love that it's almost, like you said, it's almost like they're grieving the loss of that. And so the foresight that you had in, like, okay, I've seen this happen over and over again. I don't want that to happen to me. I want to do something different. Give myself grace in this transition. That's right. And so, I mean, what a way to do that.
Yeah.
It turned out to be, it was perfect for me. I will say that it was difficult at moments in, let's say, late March, when companies were reaching out to say, hey, we'd love to have a meeting with you. I said, that's fantastic. I'll meet you in June.
It takes a lot of discipline to do that. I mean, really.
Yeah. I mean, it's, that
I'm sure they waited. I'm sure they said, yeah, great, we'll do June.
If we haven't mentioned, Jennifer is a celebrity.
Oh, stop it. Oh my gosh.
But in all seriousness, I do actually, I love this idea. Megan and I are involved with a nonprofit called the Command Purpose Foundation, which supports women veterans who are transitioning from active duty to the civilian world. And one thing we talk about all the time, which I think is so relevant here, is like change and transition are not the same thing. No. Like, change is external. It's like you change jobs, you move cities, you have a family. We all have these changes in our life, but transition is internal. Like it's an internal reorientation to the change. So, and that happens like before, during, and after the change, right? And so like the fact that you gave yourself that space is really, it's an amazing model for all of us, I think.
It worked well for me, and I wrote an article at the request of somebody out of the special ops community, because he thought there might be a parallel lesson there for those coming out of, again, that kind of intense, all-consuming, extreme career that is, that's both love and challenge every day. He thought there might be something that would resonate for folks from that community, and interestingly, I received all sorts of emails after this article was published, all sorts of emails from former CIA officers. Several of them were I don't know, a bit sad for me, because they were reflections of regret that they hadn't done something like that, and that they had kind of not managed that transition in a way that gave them that time and space to really kind of reframe their life, find new purpose, find a new mission, and they regretted that the way they handled their transition. So, anyways, it was good for me. I'll go again for sure. I don't know when I'll have 6 weeks again, but not this week. but I will go again, and it's a great experience.
That's awesome.
I love it. Well, you're not going to believe it, but we've come to...
Oh, have we?
We have.
Oh, my goodness. Time has flown.
It has really gone by quick. But we can't leave until we ask our final question. And now we've been on long enough. People know what the final question is, and so with
What is it? I have no idea.
Thank you for asking. So, in keeping with the name Iron Butterfly, if you were to give yourself a code name, because I'm sure you've had some in the past, but if you were to give yourself a code name, what would it be and why?
So I've had a lot of aliases in the past, but those are not code names. So, okay, I feel a little bit vindicated having listened to a lot of your episodes, and I realize that many people struggle with this question. So I'm not the only one.
Everybody says
So
it's the hardest question.
I tried a few different approaches.
Oh, good.
Share.
Very methodological.
Yeah,
I like
Crowdsourcing.
Okay.
So a few of your former guests are friends of mine, and I asked them. They came up with great ideas, and then I tried AI.
Oh.
So I tried that various ways, code names for people with these qualities, and then I this one was good too. I took the code names that were recommended by friends and worked backwards to get the backstory. What would that reflect? And came up with amazing stories through the help of
That must have been fun.
AI tools. Yeah, that was fun. I shared those with friends. And there were bits and pieces that got me thinking. And I didn't accept any of them. They weren't quite right. And I reflected on a retirement speech that I gave at the CIA. And no surprise to you, perhaps, but I took a rather unconventional approach to the speech. There's the standard stuff that you say, but it wasn't what I wanted to say. And in part of the speech, and I reflected on this, and this I'm getting to the name because you have to understand where it comes from. I acknowledged that, like, for a large chunk of my life, right? Oh my God, I have tried every activity, every subject you can possibly imagine. Always wondering, like, what was my thing? Like, what's my thing?
Yeah.
Like, you two are fantastic at this, but like, what is my thing? And so you name it, I've done. Like, I've studied every language you can imagine. I've tried every sport, and I've tried every kind of art and every kind of like activity. And it just, the list goes on and on and on and on. And on my nightstand, any given moment, the books I've got, something on quantum physics, then I've got something on Thai cooking, and then I've got something on, be a Russian classic novel, and it's like it's all over the map. And I finally realized that was the thing. There are people who go deep, and there are people who love going broad, and for me, it's really that. It's been experience new things, and kind of making connections between them, finding the commonality. Like when I studied Lithuanian for Little Lithuanian, I was fascinated by the fact that there are similarities to Sanskrit. And anyone who wants to talk about that, I'd be happy to talk about that. But like those kinds of unusual connections between things that otherwise you wouldn't find connected, and that like Genesis and the Rig Veda and the beginnings of the universe. And it's like, okay, why does it all begin with a sound? Like, these are the things I think about.
Yeah.
I'm giving you insights into my twisted brain. But I finally realized that was the thing. And that was the thing that I found so satisfying and rewarding about working for the CIA, and particularly working abroad for so many years, because it was just new experiences, new people, new languages, new subjects, new everything. And, to float down the Irrawaddy River accompanied by a pod of river dolphins was the most magical thing in my life. And to, be cross-country skiing, by moonlight in a field in Eastern Europe, and, all these amazing things and the people I met. And I realized that I'm fundamentally curious. I want to put the pieces together. I want to learn more and more and more about everything, how the world works. That's where I'm stuck on quantum physics these days. I can't quite get my head around it. And so this is my quest, basically. So the code name I came up with was Renaissance Quest.
Oh, that's so good.
You are a Renaissance woman.
That's so good.
And then I did what I mentioned earlier. I fed it back through an AI model to have it tell me what would be the backstory, and it sounded a lot like me.
Oh, I love that.
That too.
Oh my gosh. You know what you just did is you just gave like a blueprint for a future guest on how to get their code name.
Yeah. We should send them this episode. Like, if you have trouble with your code name.
I don't recommend it because I did not like any of the ones that were recommended. But it got me thinking.
Yeah.
And so Renaissance Quest is the thing that I think best describes me.
Wonderful.
I love it. Jennifer, thank you so much.
Thank
for
you.
saying yes to
This has been delightful.
This
It's
was
just
so fun for us.
great to see you anyways, even
Absolutely.
on a microphone.
I know, in our little spot.
I feel like I'm sitting in your living room just chatting.
Well, that's what we
exactly
wanted to
right.
feel like. Oh my gosh, this was it was such a good conversation. I can't wait for it to come out.
you.
I think the listeners are just gonna love it. And a little side note, my mom always responds after they come out, and she
does she?
has.
That's awesome.
So I don't even know if you know
I
this.
don't.
So I'll send her the episode because she'll say, "Did an episode come out this week?" And I'll send her the link, and she listens to it, and she picks up things that are just something I wouldn't even think about. So
Fascinating.
I have been sending it to some of the guests, like my mom listened, and this is
that's
what
what
she said. So be
love
prepared
that.
because she is
love that.
definitely going to love this episode, and I can't
that's
wait to hear what she
funny.
says so I can forward it to you.
Oh,
If it's
that's
not the
funny.
leopard scarf, I mean, come on.
No, she's
I mean, it has to be.
I do have a shocking amount of animal print.
That's amazing. Well,
right.
thank you on behalf of not just us, but of everyone in the intelligence community and our country. Thank you for your service, and thank you for being a part of this with us.
Thank you for the invitation. And as I've said many times about my career, I would do it all over again
Awesome.
in a heartbeat.
Amazing.
Thank you.
This has been an episode of Iron Butterfly Podcast. To learn more about Iron Butterfly Media, visit our website at www.ironbutterflymedia.com. If you like the show, please be sure to rate, review, and subscribe, and follow Iron Butterfly on social media for bonus content. You can also support us on Patreon. Lastly, we want to thank our producer, Amanda Young, and the entire Iron Butterfly team. Stay fierce, and we'll talk next time.